Today's podcast is brought to you by Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. You never know what tomorrow may bring. That's why it's important to get the right insurance coverage today. At Kentucky Farm Bureau, we deliver the protection and peace of mind your family deserves. In fact, we've been providing folks in the bluegrass with dependable service since 1943. To request a free quote, find your local KFB insurance agent at mykfbagent.com. Kentucky Farm Bureau, big on commitment. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going well. We're here in San Antonio at the American Farm Bureau annual meeting.
We are. The land of the Alamo, all fun things. Some of us were fun and learned how to two-step last night. Some of us did not.
Yeah, you asked me to go dancing. So there's a lot of things I don't do, and one thing is dancing. So my wife knows all about this.
The man that eats the donut burger at the fair and comes up with all the kooky ideas, and he won't just go dance with us.
I'm the most extroverted person ever. If we did karaoke, I'd probably go for that. I'd go for a lot of things, but not two-stepping for sure.
Well, we did do serious things, I promise, for all the listeners. We attended many sessions, many competitions yesterday, so that was super fun. And then today we've been doing all things American Farm Bureau and have had some fabulous guests. We took this thing on the road.
Yes, this is the first time we've done this, thanks to Austin Anderson, our wizard technician here at Farm Bureau. So this has been really neat. We talked to a couple folks, and we have a great guest today that I think a lot of people know about her work, and I think that's really a neat part of having this guest today. Yeah,
I think you guys are really going to like Sara. She is one that I think a lot of us read the work from her and her group, but maybe you've not gotten a chance to hear from her, so we're going to give you that chance today. So without further ado, I'm Renee Carrico.
And I'm Matt Hilton.
And this is Between the Rows. Well, hello, Sara. Welcome to Between the Rows.
Well, thank you, Renee. It's a great opportunity.
We are so excited to have you.
Yeah, we heard that. Yeah, we got to have you on this podcast. We had a lot of folks. You may have a little bit of a crowd show up here in a little bit to get to meet you. So a lot of people love your work, and so we really do appreciate you being a part of this.
Well, it's so wonderful to be able to meet you both in person and to be able to share our story, because we have just such a terrific team behind bringing all that information to you, not just me.
Yeah. Tell us about your background. What was your agriculture background? How did this kind of all get going?
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in eastern Iowa, and my family was into a lot of different things when I was younger. I'm the youngest of four children. Some of those things went away by the time I got older. So, starting with dairy and chickens and beef cows and hogs. And by the time that I was past the toddler stage, it was beef cattle and row crops and hogs. So the dairy and the chickens went away by the time I got around to it. But I had a great upbringing. My parents were wonderful about including us not only in farm things, but very focused on making sure that we had a good education, that we read a lot of different media outlets and listened to a lot of things and were aware of things that were happening politically. So that kind of was a grounding of my interest, I think, in both journalism and politics.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so was that a big part of kind of looking beyond the farm and saying something, getting into journalism?
I think so, because no one else in my family tree was a journalist. So, it wasn't anything I had to look up to an aunt or an uncle or anything like that. But my dad was never elected to anything in politics, but believe very strongly that our members of Congress work for us. Any of our elected officials are there because taxpayers are paying their salaries. And so he made a big deal about bringing them out to the farm and having conversations and being engaged. And even though I wasn't really the forefront of any of the discussions at that time because I was younger, but I do remember having those members out and having those conversations and that engagement at an early age.
Very cool.
I think that's very neat. Most people that get into journalism my age say it's because they don't hear the right story enough, so they want to get out there. I think it's so neat that you got to experience someone who was proactive on your own farm, and that's what kind of spurred the excitement. It's a little bit different than sometimes what my group hears. They see on Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, they don't like what they see, so they say, well, I'm going to advocate on the right. You got to see your parents do it in person, so I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, they were really trendsetters that way in terms of not only following what their members were doing. But, when I grew up, I graduated from high school in '76, but we were reading the Wall Street Journal and, a lot of other like Fortune and Forbes and things like that growing up. And so my dad didn't have a chance to go on to upper education. He went into the Army before he came back to farm. And my mom had a little bit of training before she went to work at the bank for a short bit. But mostly, they were just relying on being big readers and consumers of information. Yeah. And that helped me.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you do journalism, what's the step after that? You go to school and that's what you studied, correct?
Yeah, I had great teachers in high school who said, you love writing, maybe you ought to think about this journalism thing, put me into a workshop. I loved all of it. And I knew I wanted to study journalism in high school and went on to study journalism and graduate in journalism, which, a lot of kids anymore aren't quite sure what they want to do.
Yeah.
And might end up on a different path, but mine was pretty clear from the start. I went to Iowa State University because it had a variety of different types of media that we could be involved in. So magazine, newspaper, broadcast, any of that. And I was starting out on a newspaper there at the college campus and went into the yearbook and tried a lot of different things. Ended up being editor of the Iowa Agriculturalist, which is the campus magazine for agriculture, and just loved it. So that was the early start.
So when you talk about ag journalism, I mean, through the years, I'm sure that's ebbed and flowed with the amount of that out there. Did you find a gap? Is that a part of it? Like that there needed to be more ag journalism out there that's telling the story the right way?
So my degree was in journalism and political science as a minor, and I believe that there was just so many good stories to tell, and it was an opportunity to meld the kinds of things that I was interested in writing about and my ag background. And so when I had that Iowa Agriculturalist campus experience, then I also got an internship. I'm a big proponent of interns. So we try to have those at Agri-Pulse every year now too. But that gave me a start in seeing what I could do for a more professional basis. And then they hired me right out of college when I graduated. So those things helped inform me about some of the possibilities going into a commercial job that was like, wow, this is somebody's actually going to pay me for this.
That is a astounding feeling. That I feel like some of us as we age forget how that feels, but that first real paycheck, I mean, it's like, oh, so I did this for a reason. This degree was for a reason.
It was embarrassingly low at that, compared to now, but it seemed like a lot at the time.
To describe Agri-Pulse, what was that? What was kind of the thought in the founding of it? And just describe to folks that maybe don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah, so our focus has been on doing some of the things that actually I was hoping to have access to in my younger years, and that is having a trusted source of information on agricultural and food policy, so that people could go to this one source and be able to say, oh, well, maybe my position is X and maybe for somebody else it's Y, but at least they have a source of information they can go to and say, okay, this is legislation that's been introduced. These are the people that are behind it. These are people who are opposed to it. And this is where it's either likely to go or not go at all. Have that basic understanding. So then those who read or listen or watch us in our different formats at Agri-Pulse can be informed advocates. Then you can go out and you can try to lobby in whatever way is best for you and your situation. But we at least want to be that ground truthing source that people can go to and count on.
I tell, so I direct our commodities team, and so the listeners know I'm obnoxious about how much I love my team. I've got a group of 4, and they each kind of work in different commodities. And so what we do at Kentucky Farm Bureau is immediately get each of them subscribed to Agri-Pulse. And so what I always tell them is, you will find out what is going on, and then it's up to you to dig after that. And I think that, I'm sorry, I'm going to get the jargon wrong, but whether it's the Newsweek or the daily updates, it's always those big top headlines, and your links are there. And so it's almost like they get the quick summary, even if they're on the road and they're traveling between farm visits, and then they can click that link and then go check Drovers and see if it has something more in depth for that particular side of the industry. They can dive depending on what that story is. And then one of my favorite parts is towards the bottom when it says who said it, what was said. And it's a soundbite of something maybe that we would have never pulled out, of a very long jaunt of what somebody had in press release or had said when they were something we would have never tuned into being in the field. And it kind of gets you thinking, and it puts names up on top of your radar of maybe representatives you don't realize are advocating for you or maybe new to leadership positions. So I just want you to know we use it all the time. I always think it's such a good starting point to understand even if you're not 100% ingrained in this all the time, what a cool starting point to just give your quick update to get yourself back in tune before you jump in a conversation with a farmer or before you're thrown in a boardroom. So we use it regularly.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, our team, it started with just me, and I had a part-time assistant. But as we've been able to grow, and of course, Jeff Nally in Kentucky, and Jeff is our voice for Daybreak, that he does at all hours of the night for us, bless his heart. But, we have this just real dedicated team that is focused on providing, whether you want to read us or listen to us or watch our Newsmaker show, we can give you all these different outlets to find out what is, your key information. And so, like right before I sat down with you all, I just edited over a Daybreak piece, and we know it could be updated again tonight because right now things are moving 24/7, new administration, new Congress, lots of things going on. So it really is a labor of love because we just want to make sure that we have the best, most reliable information out there as quickly as we can.
So as a more farmer vibe, less journalist vibe, because Matt's going to understand a little more what you're doing with some of the background he's been in, from the farmer perspective, I think it always is baffling to us of how do you break, what is that situation where you're breaking news? Are you beating someone to the punch? Is it ever had an uncomfortable situation? How do you manage that as a team when you're trying to break these big news? Right now, it's every day, it's every minute, something news breaking. How do you guys balance that in a situation where you are known for being the ones that really know what's going on and getting it out quick?
It's not always easy, and there's a lot of pressure at times. I had a situation a few years back when I was at a location, and I've never told anybody where this location is, so I'm not going to do it now.
Nobody gives us the real scoop, do they? Just kidding. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
But somebody said some numbers, and I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, these are the market facilitation program numbers for corn and soybeans. And I sat and looked at the person next to me, who I trusted really well, and I said, did you just hear what I heard? And he said, yeah. And I go, I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to have gotten that. And we did. And so our policy is always to have two sources confirm anything, because oftentimes, even though it's a government official, there was a comment made this morning, you might have heard it, when somebody said, gosh, we haven't had a new farm bill since 2002. Well, yeah, we did. We had one in 2018. But anyway, mistakes can be made. So I had this information. I went back to Washington, D.C., and I talked to our team, and I said, we need to go to the comms department at USDA and just say, we have these numbers and we're going to report them. And they're like, oh, you can't report that. You can't do that. This is, no, it's not. No. And so walked away from that thinking, well, that's not a confirmation. We couldn't tell them the numbers because they just said, we don't want to know. We don't want you to give us this information because we don't want to have to deny it or affirm it. So we were between a rock and a hard place because there was no one else we could really go to. And so there was a lot of back and forth. I involved my trade editor, Bill Thompson, and I'd say, okay, go back down and let's try this angle. And I ended up at one point in time having the head of communications call me up and just scream at me for a period of time, of which I informed him that, again, my background, people are paying you in order to give us good information, and we want to just clarify that this is accurate or it's not. That's all you have to do. I'll tell you the two numbers I've got, and you tell me they're right and they're wrong. no, no, no. And so we go back and forth like this for like 3 or 4 days. And finally, they said, here's the offer. You can have it at 4 a.m. We won't give it to anybody else until 5 a.m. And seriously? I'm like, who's going to know the difference that I've had this for a few days now.
Yeah.
And all I'm trying to do is make sure I'm accurate, and you won't tell me. And so I said, we're going to do it, because corn and soybean farmers really want to know. And there was a big gap between the two numbers. Yeah. And they said, okay, we're going to give you a statement. So the statement said something to the effect of, Agri-Pulse's reporting is incomplete. Well, it was, because it was just corn and soybeans. So I didn't have rice, cotton. I didn't have that. Right. And then it went on to say that, it's premature to be reporting on this, blah, 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 blah. And I said, stick the whole statement in there. I don't care. I think I'm right. I went back to one other person who was close to this, and I said, just tell me, blink at me sideways if there's any chance this is wrong. And they didn't. And so we ran the story. And it was interesting because so many people were just elated that we got it out first. And then secondarily, we had so many people at USDA, including the Secretary of Agriculture, who called his subcabinet in and looked around the table as they were sitting there going, did you leak to Agri-Pulse? Did you leak? Pointing at each of them. And thank goodness I'd not called or anything to any of them. And so, we got the information out there. And then people are like, wow, are they really right? Because USDA still had not released it. And it took I think it was supposed to come out Friday. It wasn't until Tuesday. And I was driving in a car with my husband. And so he's driving, I'm working on my computer like normal, and I get a phone call from my trade editor, and Bill says, Sarah, and he reads the numbers. And I screamed so loud that my husband about went off the road, because my numbers were right.
Yeah.
And I had it right. And it was just the most fulfilling thing that I had gone through all that pain and agony. And I'm not about a gotcha story. I'm about getting it right. And I fought really hard to try to get it right. But anyway, long answer to your question. But it kind of goes to show how difficult it can be at sometimes, and how much pressure there is for you when you've got department officials who definitely don't want you to break something early.
Yeah.
It is interesting to hear the balance you have to have between accuracy and getting the information that needs to be out there to the right people that deserve to have it, and then also the competitive streak that it feels like all journalists kind of have of, no, I have it, so I've earned it. I've been in the right room. I need to get it out. It's quite a balance you guys wield. It's very interesting just from the farmer perspective. We just see news. We watch news. I don't think we think through how it got to the TV, how it got to my cell phone. And so it's interesting to me. I may have heard you say part of that story before, not in that much detail, so I'm glad to hear it. But we don't hear the process. And sometimes we don't want to. We just want the news. But I think it's helpful for people to have respect for the process and how it got there, because it's a lot more work than just holding a microphone to somebody and then writing it down after.
It definitely is. And so many times it depends on how we have developed this network of trusted sources that we can go to people and say, because there's a lot of times, let's just face it, you don't know anybody and they want to go stick a microphone in your face, you're probably not going to talk to them, or you're not going to say very much. But we've been able to, over the years of making friends with a lot of different folks on both sides of the political aisle, and so you can ground truth some of this out front. But in that case, the commodity groups didn't know, USDA was sitting tight, and so it was a very small loop of people we could rely on.
Well, I think that is the mission of good journalism, is what you did there. I mean, I think, and isn't that is that the mission of Agri-Pulse, obviously, and most journalism is more accuracy than speed and doing the right thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's been times where I would have liked to get something out that I sat on or our team sat on.
Yeah.
You may have watched this as people were speculating about who's going to be the next Secretary of Agriculture. There was an entire day when people were publishing, I think CNN led with it, but other ag journalists came out with the fact that, former Senator Loeffler was going to be the Secretary of Agriculture. And it was like a day-long steady drumbeat. And our team just said, don't think so. This doesn't feel quite right. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure glad we didn't, but a lot of other major outlets in agriculture did. So there's times where you just kind of got to go with your gut, too, about, if this would have been, if this was to be, why didn't X, Y, and Z fall with it, right, and figure that out? And so sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah, in the world of 24-hour news, Twitter and different things, I always tell folks a lot of times that, back in the day, you didn't see how the sausage was made or the cake was baked or whatever in journalism because they had time to actually bake it, and point. Now it's like, if some kind of breaking news is happening, the numbers or the moment is changing literally as tweets are coming out. And so there's a distrust that creates with that because of the speed. These folks are just trying to get information out, but they're also on a regular putting the wrong information out until maybe they do get there. And back in the day, that's how it works. So I think your patience really paid off there, and your patience probably with a lot of the stuff you guys do. People are looking for that. They just want to read something and it be right. And I think that's the shame of kind of social media in the world now. Everything's so fast that you feel like you got to have it right away if you're in journalism now. And I was like, not necessarily. How about you get it right? And
I think hearing two sources, like a number, I think we're used to hearing, we've had it confirmed. Oh, we've had this news. We've had the numbers confirmed. How many times? Who confirmed it? There's no. So I think people will feel. I hope they feel that when they don't see you, but they can hear it in your voice that two sources and trusted sources. I mean, I do think we're in the age of it's been confirmed. It's got the blue check, so we're all good, So it's got to be a new world. Tell us. We'll just jump right off of that. How has it changed over the years? I mean, you started at a college newspaper, and now you are doing something that's literally hitting my phone every day. There's a 1-minute podcast option. There's a news option with a video. How do you move through that transition and stay with the times? How do you build a team? How does Agri-Pulse start where it did and then get to where it is now?
So a lot to unpack in that question, but let's just start with the technology portion of it, because when I graduated from Iowa State and went to work for farm progress companies, I was using a typewriter with copy paper in between the versions so that we would have two versions, one for the office and one that went off to the printer. Mm-hmm. That's how old the tech was at that time. Fast forward, I'm publishing on my iPhone. I literally brought the first computer into our office and had people go, "Oh, what's this thing? We're never going to use something like that. That is so weird." Wow. And you know how that is all developed and to the iPhone portion now. So we've had lightning speed jumps in the technology, both in capturing information and producing information, being able to use the internet for so many things. Now AI coming on, where we're literally transcribing, something and turning it around in real time. So that's been the biggest difference, I think, just the technology that has enabled me to move from an early iteration of Agri-Pulse, which came out every 2 weeks, which I literally drove to the printer, picked it up, and took it to the post office, and it would arrive 2 weeks later.
Wow.
So all that's changed. In terms of building a team, a couple of things have happened. One is that I've been incredibly lucky to have people who share this passion for providing information in this niche of ag policy and food policy. And some of it's been because others have faded away in the news outlets that used to cover this. And so let me give you an example. At one point in time, almost every major daily had somebody who covered agriculture. Mm-hmm. And I'm not familiar with who your writers would have been in Kentucky, but you probably had somebody who had a D.C. bureau and somebody in state, and they followed all these things that were happening in agriculture. That started to fade away. Even the Washington Post had Ward Sinclair and others that were focused on writing things agriculture and food. And as those went away, Des Moines Register dropped their Washington bureau, and so Phil Brasher went on to Congressional Quarterly, which started an ag vertical for a while, and then that got dissolved. And I'm like, Phil, do you want to come work for me?
Yeah.
So that happened in many different ways. Stuart Doan out of Arkansas, might be a name you remember, was a gentleman who was going to be one of my early employees. He unfortunately passed away right before I was able to bring him on board. But there were so many people that had this passion for these topics, and the outlets that were providing that were starting to go away. And even at Farm Progress at one time, I had managed a team of 50, and I had 2 people full-time in Washington, D.C., and we had to close that down. So the industry was not being supported in covering these things from the type of business models that exist in the past. When I launched the digital version of Agri-Pulse in 2004, I was dead set on we're going to be subscriber only, and subscriptions are going to pay our way, and we're not going to rely on advertising revenue quite yet. If it comes, great, but let's just see if people will pay. And that was really a reversal of how the industry had been trending. It was pretty much controlled circulation where you said, hey, I reach 100 or 1 million or however many people you reach, and advertisers will then support you. Turn that around and say, no advertising, readers will support you. And so that's how we started it, discounted to $249 a year. Had a little coupon for people, and the first couple checks came from 2 Farm Bureau people. Don Vilwalk from Indiana Farm Bureau, Mary Kay Thatcher, who was at American Farm Bureau. Those were my first 2 checks who arrived in the mail.
Oh, wow.
You remember? That's cool.
Yeah. And,
Very cool.
And Mary Kay's still a subscriber.
Very
I
cool.
love that.
Don's
So
retired.
you said when you started, it was you and 1 administrative help.
Mm-hmm.
What is the team size now?
So technically, there's 26 that are on payroll, but in Washington, there's just the 6, and then we have 2 in Sacramento, and the rest are scattered around the country. We have another 6 that are in Missouri doing our sales and marketing, including our oldest son who's in the business with us, and my husband, who, when he joined in 2009 full-time, that really enabled us to do the advertising growth that we had, and now we've turned that over to Jason. So we have just incrementally grown over the years, 1 person, next year another person, and we have the contractors like Jeff that are just invaluable to us.
Well, talk to us about your family, because I don't think I knew your son was involved. So talk to us what started out maybe as kind of your dream and your brainchild. How has your family been involved in that? Talk to us about kind of what brought your husband in, and your son was interested. That has to be a cool moment to get him back in the group.
Yeah. So, part of what they've done is just been patient with me. Because, when you start your own business, and I've never borrowed any money since the first $5,000 that I had to get started. I borrowed from a friend. And so it's kind of lean pickings, you don't have any income until those first checks arrive in the mail, and then you hope they tell other people, and then it continues to grow, and you start to invest in your marketing, and so I could have borrowed more money, I could have taken more risk, but I think, as most entrepreneurs will tell you, you kind of have to figure out your own journey and what you're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And I was not comfortable going out, starting really big, and so I started small and was able to just, as the business grew, then it can bring on more people and have more help. And so Jason, our oldest son, actually was pretty good at accounting. So when I started the business, I said, here, you're going to learn QuickBooks. And he was like, what? But he did. And so he was involved whether he wanted to be or not.
Voluntold, it's fine.
Yeah. And I think the whole family really took it that way, because journalists work 24/7. I mean, we work hard, play hard, but at the same time, if something breaks in the middle of the night, mm-hmm. or mm-hmm. you're out doing something really fun and source sends you something, you gotta get it out. And then if it's just you or another person, there's not a lot of places to look around the room and delegate.
Right.
So we were able to just build the business around that kind of crazy schedule, and in between. So you're going to soccer games, you're going to baseball games or whatever, and you work around it. I was fortunate that my mom and dad would come to meetings with me and help watch the kids and all that kind of stuff. So that part of the family involvement was very good. People were very supportive. And then you ask about my husband. Both of us had been in publishing, and so he took a little detour. He got asked to go to USDA and work in rural development, and he was a deputy undersecretary there. Great passion for that, as I think many of us are, about rebuilding and stimulating the economy in rural areas. And he retired from USDA after working there for several years, and I said, I'd really like to have you come in and help on advertising, because I can promote myself, but I'm really not the best person to close a deal. And he is. And he thought about it for a long time, because it's not easy for married couples to be in business together, to work together all the time, and especially with these kinds of crazy schedules. And he finally said yes. So that was
Well, you
good.
closed that deal.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I got
So you
that
closed one.
I got that one. But and then Jason really didn't. He'd gone off and done other things, and one day we just said, if you want to, we're going to start you at the very bottom of the scale here and sell cold call subscriptions. And he did, and he just was so good at it. And he's got just a wonderful way to network with people, and has great EQ. And then every year he continues to amaze us about how much he's been able to grow in this.
So when he started, I mean, this is, to see it today, how does it feel to kind of look back and be such a valuable, trusted resource for farmers all over this country? How does it feel to look back and kind of see where you're at today, and still going, and still, I mean, it just keeps growing and improving all the time? How does it feel?
I pinch myself a lot. It sometimes feels like it's just flown by. Yeah. And I suppose that should be that way, because think about it. If you're having fun, it should be just, zip through the years.
Yeah.
But I've been so passionate about serving people. And when I hear folks, whether it's you guys and others, who just say, I learned so much, and I was able to do X, Y, and Z because of something that you were able to provide, it just does my heart good. It really, really does. So I love that kind of feedback from folks. But it's taken a lot of help. I mean, we've had great employees. We've had those who are just, they understood that, if you called them at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it doesn't happen very often, but if something really needed to be done, they would be there for you.
It's neat for me to see that we always say ag and rural communities are a family. And then I think it's cool to see, although I'm sure when people read news, you think suits, you think microphones, you think corporate, you think fancy, I think it's going to be cool for people to hear that it's also a family. It's also a tight-knit group. I mean, humble beginnings for what you were able to do, and you've been able to build a family around you. That's got to be, whether it's your real family or your work family, that's really neat. I think people will really relate to that.
Yeah.
I think people do understand, and even in Washington, D.C., it's kind of a small town in so many ways, especially in agriculture, because there's a fairly known sphere of influencers that you got to get to know. But then there's new ones that are coming on every year, and I love to go meet new staff members. And one of the other rewarding things that we've done is that we actually provide Agri-Pulse to new staff on Capitol Hill for free, because we want them to be educated about these issues. And so now you get new people coming on board, and they're like, "Oh, I heard I can get Agri-Pulse. Is that true?" And then they're like, "Yeah." So we are now reaching, I forget the most recent number, something like 2,800 staffers that cover either ag, food, or rural issues, and somewhat renewable energy. And our open rates are incredible.
Very cool. Yeah. So, we are the voice of agriculture as a Farm Bureau, and I think voices come in different ways. And I think you've been an amazing voice for agriculture, and especially for farmers. You're such a resource for everybody. So how does that feel? That you get that, you get so many people just always using your content all the time. They look at it, like she said, right away. That's my first source. Do you have some stories where you've met farmers and you talked about it, how it's changed? Any real neat story of like how that you felt that impact?
Oh, in so many different ways. I have one person from Missouri Farm Bureau who, if our digital file is never exactly right in the morning, he'll click me and say, "Yep, this didn't hook right."
Just so you know, every Farm Bureau has one of that person. We've all got one.
Well, thank goodness it doesn't happen very often. But whenever I see him, I go, "Hey, thank you." He'll tell me. So it comes with a lot of responsibility, which I feel very strongly about, that you have to ground truth yourself and make sure you understand that this is not only important to be of service, but to get it right. But I think that Farm Bureau has been such a good partner for us. We just are blessed that it's not only in Kentucky, but Farm Bureaus all across the country have been subscribers and supporters and sources. And that's the other thing that I hope that your listeners will take home, and that is that we like to hear from different people who have different experiences, and sometimes that becomes a story. And like we may hear of some really off thing in, I'll give you an example, in Texas, where some people were having trouble getting crop insurance, and so they send us a note, and then it leads into looking at whether or not, what options they have. Same thing in California, where we can hopefully help educate people about all the multitudes of challenges that they have out there. And so we take that responsibility very seriously. We do like to, we like to have that access, let people know they can find our emails, they can find our telephone numbers. I had a guy the other day who contacted me via email, couldn't get his story link to work, and turns out he wasn't a subscriber, which is why his story link didn't work.
Maybe that'll do it.
Yeah. And I said, "Oh, gosh, your name's really familiar. Are you an author by chance?" And he said, "Yeah, former Wall Street Journal." I said, "And you wrote Merchants of Grain?" And he said, "Yeah." It was one of the first books I ever read.
Yeah.
He's like, "I had no idea that you would actually respond to my email." I said, "Well, it came in."
Yeah.
I answered. So that happens quite often.
So I get questions a lot about specifically ag journalism. And Tim Thornberry, who our listeners know, he gets to hang out on the side of the room. If you guys could see him, he's hanging out with us and listening in. But he is constantly talking about how we've got to find more young agricultural journalists, whether it's communications in any form, whether it's a writer, whether it's digital content creators. We don't have ag-specific kids, or maybe kids with ag backgrounds that can understand why a farmer would edit it 3 times, because I'd really rather if we didn't show the thistle in that side of that video. And so, or we'd love to maybe cut that piece of that quote. I think that wasn't really what he meant. This is where the content is. Just have that little bit of ag insight to be able to help that guy work through it. What would you tell students today that are good at writing, maybe grew up in a rural community, have a passion for farming? What would be your advice to them to want to keep going, to want to go to journalism school, to want to kind of fight the ag fight? What would be your advice towards those kind of kids?
Yeah, so I still think that journalism is a very worthy profession, and despite the fact that I described those cutbacks from, 15, 20 years ago, there are opportunities. They don't look the way they used to, perhaps. I think that so many people have relied on the technology that they're not hiring, perhaps, the people that want to go and actually dig down into the sources and get to know and work with them. But there are opportunities, and it is so rewarding when you can help a family, when you can shine light on an issue, when you can actually bring that transparency to a discussion, it really makes such a difference that we need so many more of those individuals. And we try to work with different schools that are trying to develop not only journalists but ag econ folks. And we have a Future Ag Leader program where we provide Agri-Pulse in a classroom that people can read it and get up to speed on some of these issues. And so I would encourage anybody who's thinking about a career in journalism that also is interested in food and agriculture, reach out to us, and we'll get you excited about some of the topics, because there are so many right now, from labor to food safety to what we're going to see with some of these new Trump appointees. There are just dozens of stories waiting to be written.
Yeah, and there's probably a young Sarah out there someday.
I bet there is.
Yeah, that with all of this technology we're talking about, actually there's lots of opportunity to kind of create your own path in some ways, right?
Absolutely. And I couldn't say enough about the fact that I love to bring young people into our organizations because, first of all, usually they're a lot smarter than I am on anything technical. That, you can say, oh, what happened here? And they're like, and it's fixed. So that's all good. One caution I would have for a lot of people who are in ag comm programs, again, I did not go through the ag journalism portion. I was in the J school. I really would not hire anybody if they have not been through at least a couple of years of writing, which involves complete sentences. And
Tim's going to jump out of his chair. He's so excited over there. Are you asking people to use punctuation?
Oh, yeah.
Salutations?
No,
what?
Correct grammar. And don't give me little shorthand things that you use on social media. That's great for social media, but I need someone who can write. And increasingly, we need people who can broadcast and who can be on our TV show and those sorts of things. That's all good. But if you're not foundational in your writing and grammar, it's really difficult for us to hire you.
Well, where can we find all this stuff? Someone, again, they're not subscribers. How do we get to you?
Just send me a note, Sarah, no H, I'm H-less, SARA at AGRI-Pulse, PULSE.com. And we'll either put you on a free trial or help you out in anything you have a question about. We'll try to help.
Well, thank you. Yep.
Well, Sarah, we cannot thank you enough. I think we've said it once, we've said it 100 times kind of during this podcast, but a lot of things happening right now, whether it's in San Antonio or across the country, and a lot happening in D.C. So your time is valuable, and we cannot thank you enough. Your team actually reached out to us. Y'all made us feel like big timers on this podcast to get us on here. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, listeners. Be sure to subscribe to our larger podcast, The Kentucky Farm Life. And we'll see you next time on Between the Rows.